Hello, everyone. I'm Yasmin Taj Editor, ETHRWorld International, and I'm thrilled to welcome you all to yet another episode of our video interview series brought to you by ETHRWorld Southeast Asia in collaboration with Enparadigm on the theme Talent Management and Development for the Future of Work. As organizations increasingly embrace remote and distributed work models, providing continuous learning and development opportunities has become crucial for businesses. Skill enhancement and adaptability is no longer a nice to have, but a must have. And in this competitive job market, and companies that invest in learning opportunities and the overall development of their employees will attract and retain top talent. Through one thought-provoking video interview series on the topic, talent management and development for the future of work, we have uncovered how organizations have maximized the impact of learning opportunities by creating a progressive culture of learning and development. In our interaction so far with some of the most notable leaders throughout this series, we have learned some of the most innovative strategies and practices that will help individuals and businesses thrive in this dynamic business environment. And today we wish to bring to you some more insights, actionable takeaways, and a deeper understanding of how talent management and development will play a pivotal role in shaping the future of work through another episode of Learn to Lead. For this episode, I'm delighted to welcome Chevaun Chee, Head of Talent Management at OCBC Bank, and John Cherian, who's CEO of Enparadigm. A seasoned talent developer, Chevaun is passionate about nurturing leaders, creating a positive work culture, and enabling organizations to harness the potential in their people. And John, for us, his endeavor is to make the complex simple, and his belief in the power of learning to make people and businesses better has been the significant driving force in the Enparadigm journey. A journey that brings together business thought, learning methodology, and user experience into our technology-driven learning platforms. The understanding of unconscious competence and how to help businesses get there is his field of permanent study. So thank you so much for joining us, Chevaun and John. It's a pleasure to have you for this episode.
Thank you, Yasmin.
Thank you, Yasmin. Pleasure to meet you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to host to both of you. So without any further ado, let me deep dive directly into the questions. And to begin with, let's look at what are some of the top trends that are driving the talent management and development function in 2023 and in the coming year as well. Chevaun, I'd love to hear your thoughts, some of the top trends that you've noticed.
I think the finding and hiring the right people, that seems to be a trend that hasn't gone away, I must say. And I think it's even more critical and important in today's world. That's one. Second, it's really about allowing and creating space for the employees to learn and to grow. Another one that I have also seen, it's really about tailoring the employee's experience. So I think more and more we're talking about giving everybody a wow experience, right? And we also know that in today's world, remuneration, benefits, and things like that are extremely competitive. So what is it that would differentiate you as an employer is really the experience, and how do we create that wow experience for every employee that walks through our door? And I think last but not least is really talking about how do we optimize our workforce, and what is our strategy, right, to ensure that our workforce remains relevant and that they remain engaged and productive through the years, right?
I think, yes, it's clearly that we are living in a market which is driven by talent today. It's an employees market, right? So the 3 points that you mentioned, whether it's about hiring and retaining the best talent, whether it's about taking care of the learning and development journey, or whether it is giving them that wow experience, very, very crucial if you have talent at the core of your business. John, your thoughts, what key trends have you been seeing working with multiple organizations today?
I'm going to divide this into 3 parts, the why, the what, and the how. So I think over the years, there seems to be a lot of clarity on both the why and the how. Why, what, when we say why, it's about what outcomes do we really want to drive over here, right? What business outcomes, what people outcomes in terms of productivity, in terms of engagement, in terms of retention of our people, in terms of org culture. I think there's a lot of clarity over there. Similarly, in terms of the how piece, right? I think there's a lot of consensus today that we want personalization to go up, right? We want experiences to go up. We want people to be able to get highly relevant and hyper personalized inputs, which can help them grow, right? So I think there is a lot of alignment on these two. What we are seeing as a gap in the recent past has been, the what question, right? What do we want people to learn, right? And I think it's a very, very fast moving landscape over there. And my own answers to the what's have been changing ever more rapidly. There was a time when it used to change every few years. Then it became every year. Then it became every quarter. Now it's probably every week, right? So that becomes, a major challenge for L&D and talent management professionals to stay on top of. I think recently when I was speaking at a large conference, and when I asked questions on the what to professionals in front of me, for the first time in many years, I could see a lot of confusion. What do we want people to learn? Given that there's so much of AI floating around, that the question on what should technology do versus what should people do, I think that's a very evolving question today, and I don't think there is so much clarity on answers there.
Very interesting point, John. I think, yes, while the why and how are pretty clear for organizations as to why do they want to develop their talent and how they can do, but what, as you rightly said, because the skills are changing so fast and the expectations of employees in terms of their own career journeys is changing so fast. Businesses are changing so fast. So by the time you reach one point, you end up looking at what next. So that's important. I think these are some questions that learning leaders, we're all trying to figure out. So thanks for sharing that. Come to my next question regarding some challenges. While John did point out that the what is very important as a challenge, Chevaun, I'd like to hear from you. What are some of the other emerging challenges that you're seeing or facing in your talent development and learning function today? As we see how the expectations of a diverse and hybrid workforce has evolved in terms of career development, what have you been seeing? What challenges have been coming up for you?
I think one point that John brought up, which is, what do we want employees to learn? And actually, it's a very interesting question because I think organizations would have our expectations. We do have our needs. And I think there are things that we definitely need our employees to learn, to know because of the immediate needs and of the future needs. But then the employees themselves may have a totally different expectation or a different want. And then I think the challenge for learning and development or for the organization is how do we converge the two, right? If they are different. So if the organization says, for example, that digital skills is something that everybody recognizes the importance is critical. And by digital skills, it's encompassing everything from your data to your AI and things like that. And we recognize that this is critical and important for any line of business, whether you are in HR, whether you are in the business line, and even our auditors are saying that they need the data, they need AI. So every aspect of the business needs this. And the question is whether our employees sees the same, right? And some do and some don't. So what do you do with the people that don't see eye to eye, for example, with what the organization is driving? So I think one of the emerging challenge that I'm seeing is the fact that employees are expecting almost bespoke development journeys that are extremely customized and tailored for their needs. And sometimes the unfortunate thing is when this doesn't align with what the organization needs. So how do we balance that, right? Because we also want to ensure that we are catering to the individual's needs, the individual's career aspirations, and so on and so forth. So how do we balance the organization need versus the individual need? I think that's one critical challenge that I'm seeing. The other one that I'm seeing is really in terms of how do we, and I think John alluded to this, right? It's really the fact that the world is changing so fast. And how do we as, professionals ensure that we are not just keeping up with what's happening in the world today, but also preparing our workforce for tomorrow. So there's always that tension, right? To say that, we need our people to be able to perform today, but yet, they cannot sit back, or they cannot wait for tomorrow to come to be prepared for it. And if you look at the school system, for example, across the world, and this is something that I think the academics would tell you, right? That the school system currently, it's about 10 to 20 years behind what is happening in the real world today. So which is why they are very concerned that the graduates that they're pushing out are not ready for the workforce. But yet at the same time, with a whole bunch of people who are in the current workforce, they are not ready for tomorrow. So then how do we as learning professionals, for example, deal with that, right?
I think very core and challenge that you pointed out, Chevaun. I totally agree. The first on business alignment with the employee expectations and their own aspirations when it comes to their career journey, their learning pathways. How do you bring that together? John, your thoughts? I think you must be facing this in a lot of your interactions with business leaders. How do you, what are the other, this is a very, very big challenge. So have you seen any kind of a solution coming out of it, or what other challenges do you see are more relevant?
Yeah, so I think when you construct learning solutions, one of the key things you have to keep in mind is what we call skill laddering or competency laddering, which is basically, what are the basic skill sets? And then on top of that, what are the next set of skill sets? And then you come to the higher order skills, right? For example, if you want someone to display executive presence, the basic skill sets there are aspects such as communication, being able to influence, having empathy to read the room. So you need to have these basic skill sets, and your executive presence is then developed and built on top of these, right? So having that clarity from a learning design perspective becomes very important. Now, today, the question is, which of these basic skill sets are already there in the population? Which of these learning skill sets are even required today? If I were to rewind 50 years back, people in the finance function 50 years back, I'm sure would have spent most of the time in basic calculations, right? Before the advent of calculators and Excel sheets. But once calculators and Excel sheets started coming in, their focus started shifting from the basic calculations and making sure that what they're calculating is correct. Their focus started shifting to modeling, to financial modeling, right? And looking at how a business cash flow can be modeled, or how the P&L or any other aspect of the business can be modeled in the future, right? Similarly, now we are seeing that same thing coming to the content side. So far, the world of data had already cracked this, but the world of content had not. And with generative AI, there's been a huge leap in that direction, right? And what that means is that if you have to create content, you no longer have to worry about the basics of content writing, right? Imagine you are a movie editor. Earlier you had to worry about finding the right script. You had to write each aspect of the script. You had to put in characters. You had to put in scenes. There was so much work you had to do. And then you had to find actors to play those scenes. You had to render it well. And then you had to finally edit it and put it together, right? But now, you're seeing that AI has started to do a lot of that, right? So your movie director no longer has to worry about all these, right? They can get a script generated. They can get characters. They can get background settings, music, all of this from AI today. And their focus therefore shifts from the basics to more higher order aspect, right? So when it comes to talent, this is a key question for us as, learning professionals today, right? What capability are we going to enable our talent with? Are we going to focus on the basics, or are we going to focus on making them use tools and be better at tools? I think the answer is somewhere in between. You need probably both. Yeah. Right. One new field of engineering that just come out, is called prompt engineering, right? Yeah. Which you wouldn't have heard that word, before 2023. Yeah. It's basically how do you give the right prompts to generative AI to make it come out with outcomes. Yeah. Yeah. So it's a new field, right? And it's again lot of work has gone this year in making people learn prompt engineering. That's just to share an example.
Yeah, that's very so interesting. The way the kind of skills are coming up on a daily basis is very interesting to see that, right? But as you rightly said, it's a combination of the basic skills which will always remain the way they are, and they'll always be in demand. They'll always be required for any business to run, or for any employee to grow in their respective journeys. But yes, how can you use technology to enhance those skills? What things can you let go of? What things can you get better at? I think those are going to be important questions that learning leaders as well as employees themselves need need to answer. So thanks for sharing that. And as Chevaun also very rightly pointed out, it's also about going back to the school system, education system, right? It's also about starting right from that basic, where you start, upskilling your students from that level. So by the time they reach the job market, they already have those skills somewhat with them. So that's going to be very, very important. Thanks for sharing that. Chevaun, can you tell us some examples of learning initiatives that you have taken and brought forward at your organization and that have made your workplace more inclusive, especially since you're working remote and hybrid and a mix of everything?
I think one of the things that John brought up earlier was really to say that what kind of skills would, I think I would call them evergreen skills, right? And I think one of the things that we have done was one to identify what are some of these evergreen skills. So things like communication, things like critical thinking, I don't think they would ever go out of fashion or out of trend in that sense, right? And I think the question then is, then how do we bring in any experiential learning, for example, that could involve both the people who are online and the people who are, present physically, right? And I have to tell you that there is no simple answer, because very often any training partners that we work with will tell us there will be some compromise, to this, because no matter what we do, there will be one part, whether is it the in-person or the people online, who may be slightly neglected. So I think what we have really done is we have tried to do it multiple ways, right? One is, of course, I think the organization has invested quite a fair bit in terms of building the infrastructure. So enabling, the hybrid workplace to ensure that we can see people online can see us, all these technology are being put in place. And actually we use the so-called the lull period during COVID to upgrade a lot of our systems. That's one of them. Two is actually we work with a lot of our partners to experiment. So I think one thing that I would really say is be open and be willing to experiment. So we tried, for example, saying that what if we have multiple facilitators? So people who are online, people who are in person, so that we can cater to the different groups. But where do we diverge and where do we converge, right? So I think there's a lot of thought being put into the design to say that, where are the activities, for example, that would really make sense, where we can, come together, both physical and hybrid, and where are the parts where we can break out. And if we do break out, it cannot be a case where only the people in person feel extremely engaged, and then the people online are like, hey, what's happening? What's going on? So we have people who roam the breakout rooms online, for example, to also engage them. There have been hits and misses, I have to tell you. Sometimes it works a lot better than others. But I think, the learning that we have is really be willing to experiment. So we have tried games, we have tried metaverse of some form. We really have tried many different things to say that, that how do we create a more inclusive environment for learning, so that we can engage, both the online participants as well as the ones in person.
Yeah, I think that's so crucial. I think, as you said, customizing the journeys for the online participants and the in-person participants, and yet bringing, as you said, yet converging the journeys together. How do they learn in the same manner? And, how is it equitable for the both of them? I think that's going to be very, very important. Any thoughts on John, and how can learning initiatives be more inclusive? How can technology help in that?
Yeah, so technology, I guess, is always a double-edged sword. Especially when it comes to the question of inclusiveness.
Yes.
And it's not easy to get that balance right. And I think a very high degree of empathy, customer empathy or user empathy, is required from whoever is designing the experience.
Mm-hmm.
So colors that may seem very obvious to you, I may not be able to see them at all, because my eyesight, or the way my eyes work are different from yours. Right, that's just a very, very simple example, and it's definitely not easy to get it right. Mainly because things are moving at such fast pace that even from a product creation perspective, those who are creating products might have to decide on whether they want to spend more time on innovation from a new technology perspective, or whether they want to ensure that whatever innovation they are coming up is also accessible to a large population, right? That's one dimension of inclusivity. There are so many other dimensions of inclusivity as well. A lot of times about how do we make people feel welcome, and how do we make them feel safe. The psychological aspect in any learning environment, it becomes very important. You always have people in different stages of learning, right? So you have people who don't know what they don't know. You have people who know what they don't know. You have people who don't know what they know, and then you have people who know what they know. So there are four sets of, right? And
Good point. Yes.
that lens, you have to treat these people very different. You can't put all of them into the same learning environment, because there will be a lot of chaos.
Yeah. I agree. Everybody is so different in their learning journeys, and the way they learn, the speed that they learn at. I think making it equitable that way is very, very important. Yes.
Yeah. And I think there's something called the Dunning-Kruger paradox, right? Which is that the less a person knows about something, probably the more confident they are about their abilities in that space, right? Once you know a little bit more, you realize that, okay, there is a lot more to the space than I am aware of. So your confidence starts coming down, and you become a little more realistic in terms of your abilities in that space.
Yeah, ignorance is bliss, right? That's what they say.
This is a constant challenge for talent professionals, because it becomes our job to kind of get the right degree of competence there, right? But if the person already believes that they're very competent, then you have to first help them see see the mirror, or do a little bit of reflection, some understanding and insight into the space, before you really prep them up for learning, right? So that's also another key dimension of inclusivity in the learning experience.
Great points. I think I totally agree with you. I think making people understand their own learning capabilities also when you're creating that culture is going to be very, very important. So thanks for sharing that. Coming to another crucial point, bringing in business when it comes, how do you involve business in L&D? So Chevaun, my question to you would be, do you think that learning teams are able to consistently get inputs from the business on what's working and what's not? And how can we kind of together solidify the learning infrastructure and process to develop and nurture our talent?
I think I would have a yes and no answer to your question. The yes part is I think, to be fair, at least in OCBC, we do try very hard to, work together with the business leaders to see what are the needs, or, in fact, we try to anticipate, right, what might be future needs, and work with the leaders to say, how can we curate learning that would serve your business and things like that. So on that hand, I would say that it's a yes. We definitely, work with the business as much as possible. But once again, the world is changing so fast. And, especially in the banking world, right? Like one crisis happens, and then what does that mean for the bank? How do we turn around things that are extremely fast? And how do we work with the business, for example, right? So recently, I think just this year, of course, you guys have heard of all the drama around the Silicon Valley Bank, and then the Credit Suisse and so on and so forth. So how do we work with partners to say that we can serve the business? And I think a lot of times it's being very, very close to the ground. That's one. Keeping your eyes and ears open to say what's happening out there in the market. But then I think the critical question that a lot of times that we get asked is, how do we make it extremely applicable? So I think in terms of like current affairs and things like that, we have come to a point with our business where we can turn things around quite fast because, for example, when the Credit Suisse crisis happened, one of our business reached out and said, can you bring us a economist? And we said, we can bring you an academia who is very, very in touch, and then we can turn it around very quickly within 24 hours for you, right? By having great partners who are willing to work with us on things like that. But then the question is, how do our people on the ground apply this learning? I think that's where, it's a little bit harder for us to have real-time measurements, right? Does it mean that, for example, we are able to bring in people immediately within 24 hours and our people are able to take these insights and immediately apply to their analysis, to how to deal with clients and things like that? I think that's the part that we are not able to measure, right?
I think that's again the the most pivotal point when it comes to learning, and development initiatives, the ROI, right? How do you prove that ROI? How do you measure that? So while you understand business, and these days, I think a lot of learning, demands come from the business. This is what they require. But how do you firstly cater to that? And secondly, how do you then give them the ROI on that and the impact that it has created? I think that will always remain a question but though organizations, I think, have come a long way in figuring it out how well, the initiatives are working. But I think, we are still on the journey. John, your thoughts on, firstly, the ROI part. Secondly, how can we solidify the whole infrastructure better so that, there's more alignment between business and the learning function?
So one of the things that we started doing quite early on was, we would take a lot of our work along with clients, and we would do a lot of joint nominations to, global forums like a Brandon Hall or a training industry or a Deloitte or an Economic Times, and then look at whether these initiatives are able to win awards because they are competing with other global learning initiatives from other organizations, right? And over a period of time, we were able to come out with a good impact framework where we look at two dimensions. One is, looking at impact from a short-term versus long-term perspective. Secondly, looking at it from an ease of attribution to a difficulty of attribution perspective, right? So you have a two-dimensional, kind of a spread there, right? So looking at things like, how engaged is a learner? Are they consuming your content? Are they giving a good NPS score for your experience that you're going to give them? Right? These are very short term, and these are easy to measure, easy to attribute to the learning experience, right? Things on the talent side, like, for example, how much of the talent have you been able to retain? Or if you're doing learning from a managerial perspective, how much of the talent below them are you able to retain as an organization? The cohort that's going through your solution, are they showing better talent retention than cohorts which are not going through the solution, right? That's definitely one more way of looking, because increased retention is always a function of, is the talent able to fit into the role better, and are they feeling that they're able to be productive and engaged, right? And similarly, an improvement in skill scores over a period of time, right? Can you look at talent and see how they've shifted from a basic level of proficiency to an intermediate level of proficiency to an advanced level of proficiency, right? So that becomes another metric to look at. And on a slightly more long-term basis, looking at what % of your key talent is getting filled by internal, promotions, right? So over maybe a 5-year period, if you're looking at maybe 2 or 3 levels of promotions, are you able to increase the number of people who are filling those roles from within? Which means you're probably developing them better for, more senior roles and more advanced competencies, right? On the business metrics side, again, it comes in more what I will call a short-term outcome, but at the same time, difficult to attribute, right? So for example, if, saying that, our sales has gone up, or our deal sizes have gone up, or our conversion rates have gone up in a particular function, or if it comes to someone on the operations side, customer complaints have gone down, or customer NPS scores have gone up, attributing that back to learning is always, a little tougher. So there, what you can do is to work with the business leader, agree that, that this is the benchmark where we are, and at the end of 6 months, this is where we all want the outcome to be. And the business leader drives 2-3 initiatives there. The learning and the talent management teams also drive a few initiatives from a skill and knowledge and, application perspective. And it's a team game, right? One of the challenges there is if something has changed in the macro environment, it may hit your business numbers even if your teams are better prepared from a talent perspective. So in the short term, it's difficult to kind of gauge whether your initiative will create a positive outcome or whether you may not be able to correlate any outcomes from what you've done. Right?
Yes, exactly.
Sometimes I think these are some of the ways in which we look at impact. And over a period of time, I think we've got a much more predictable way of measuring impact from a learning outcome.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's about involving business from day one, right? From step one, day one. If they understand the journey and how the learning initiatives are working, the result is somewhat become obvious to them and will show in terms of short-term or long-term, impacts that they've created. I think that's very important. So thanks for sharing that. And now it's time for the final question. Yes, Chevaun.
I was just saying that, if I could just add on, I think John mentioned that it's a team game, right? And I think with the business leaders, you need to have co-ownership. That's critical and important, right? So we talked about, for example, building bench strength. And actually, if you think about it, a lot of the things that we do in talent, in learning and development, are all towards building a critical bench strength for the organization. So it's not HR's job to build bench strength. It is, but it isn't the sole ownership of HR. And I think once the business leaders see that and they work in partnership with HR and we all co-own this, right? Then I think, that's half the battle won, right? And that's half the infrastructure that you need to build in that sense.
Yeah, I think, the intent and their belief, I think it's actually half the battle won. So yeah, thanks for sharing that, Chevaun. And now it's time for the final question for this interview. Quickly, Chevaun, I'd like to hear from you. According to you, what are the top 3 skills that will power the future of work?
I sigh because I think that, the future of work is going to be extremely unpredictable in some ways. I think there are some things that is predictable, but there are some things that we can expect will be constantly changing, right? So I think the agility to adapt, the agility to learn, it's definitely one top critical skill that I would say is important. I think the second skill is really the ability to empathize, really, listening, understanding where people are coming from. I think especially in a world that is getting more and more divisive, right? It's critical and important to and I almost think that empathy would be the number 1 leadership skill. Almost. And last but not least, and then I think this could be something that some people might think that the AI, for example, would be able to think more critically and more analytically. I think that as humans, we still have, because we are able to combine that empathy together with our critical thinking and analytical thinking, right? So I think it's the combination of these different skills that would really help us in the future of work.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. I love the fact that these are the essential, basic life skills that you pointed out, Chevaun. So I really like that. John, your thoughts on what Chevaun said, and what are your top 3 skills that will power the future of work?
So I couldn't agree with Chevaun more. And I think she just took the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah.
I think empathy, I would kind of go in a very similar fashion. Empathy, because of the fact that most of what you're doing is not really for yourself, it's for someone else.
It is.
Whether you're in a function internal to the organization or external, there is an internal or an external customer that you're working for, which is why empathy becomes so important, right? So that you can put together the right solution for them. Secondly, the aspect of, how do you look at data? How do you look at, making sense out of data? Because the good thing today is there's a lot of data, but that's also a not so good thing because you're overwhelmed with data, right? So how do you zoom out, and how are you able to get context and clarity? How are you able to filter signal from noise? And that becomes a very, very critical skill. And critical thinking also comes in the same bucket, right? That how do you avoid biases? How do you avoid, getting trapped in, what we call local maxima, or, very micro level of thinking. But when you zoom out, the picture completely changes.
Yeah.
Right? So these skills become extremely, extremely important. Yeah.
Absolutely. So agree with you also. I think, again, just reiterating what you both said, I think the agility, the ability to adapt, the ability to empathize with your environment, with people, I think very, very core critical skills, along with understanding data, understanding technology, understanding, how technology will impact your work, using that to build up your analytic and critical skills. I think these are going to be those top skills that will really, really help us prepare for a future that might be unpredictable, uncertain. Hence, these are the only skills that will help us sail through that. So on that note, Chevaun and John, thank you so much for your time. It was a wonderful conversation. So much to learn from the both of you, and how we can enhance the learning experience in an organization, how we can work towards building organizations with a continuous learning culture, what skills will be needed to empower our workforce, how can we align business with the expectations of the employee, how can we have better talent, retain better talent, and build talent that is ready for the future. So thank you so much for your thoughts and views. Those were really, 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 really commendable.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And I'd also like to thank our wonderful audience for joining us for this exciting session. In case you've missed out on our previous episodes of Learn to Lead, you can now view them on our website, which is ETHRWorld Southeast Asia. You can also check out the link below to view the complete series of talent management and development for the future of work. So for now, we will take your leave, but stay tuned for many such insightful series and initiatives for the future. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care and bye-bye.